Will this meeting please come to order of the Election Commission? Today, what is it, the 5th of December at 1 o'clock?
Thank you. And the deputy clerk will call roll call.
Bonnie?
Here.
Sue?
Yes.
Sue Kenny is participating telephonically. Joyce?
Yes. Here telephonically.
Here.
Vicky?
Here.
Petey?
Petey is out
She's
of
out of
town.
town. Okay. And Gwen Matthew left a message that she was on her way in. So she should be arriving shortly. So there is no old business, so we can move on to our new business, which is the review of the Title 28 revisions. We had our first public hearing at the meeting on Tuesday, and unfortunately we had no one to testify. The clerk's office has been working to get the information out through our social media circles and through other connections that we have, inviting people to come testify. We do think it's very important to engage the public in this conversation because this does affect folks across the municipality. So hopefully our second public hearing is scheduled for the regular assembly meeting of December 17th. And hopefully we will have folks out to testify at that point.
It didn't come up at the meeting. I just happened to cruise in until 11 or so. It was quite late.
Yeah, it was the second to last item on the agenda, so it came up right before one of the tennis conversations.
So on that meeting, just a quick note, I don't know if you're going to touch on this, but one of the goals here for the commission is to have you create some kind of resolution that transmits your comments, recommendations, etc., to the assembly in time for them to have that on the 17th. And ideally, someone from this body would be there to speak to that if there's questions.
So, as we went through with Title 28, we definitely tried to incorporate the suggestions from the Election Commission, and the one that we worked on was the improved protection of voter personal information. And so we have created a new section, which is 28.50.300.
What's the page?
It's page 17 of 43. So we are now codifying that the poll watchers have to register with the clerk. And we are codifying the agreements that we are requiring the observers to sign. And this is something that we started last year, and I actually brought last year's copy of our confidentiality agreement. We did require all observers to sign this, and we did require them to sign in and out every day. We created an observer's sign-in sheet, so we did know who was present on each day that we had the observers there, and then every observer who was in the room was required to sign this confidentiality agreement, which directly addresses social security numbers, voter identification numbers, birth dates and place of date, and stating that they will not reveal the confidential information to any third party. And so now those, let the record reflect that Gwen Matthews isn't. So that is now in code, and we'll continue with that practice again this upcoming election. And we are going to have a poll watcher booklet and a poll observer booklet available. We are still editing those, though.
Should we ask questions as the subject comes
Yes,
up?
please do.
What's the difference between observer and watcher in this section?
The poll watchers are at the polling place on election day, and observers are After the polls have closed, the observers are present during the review of the question and absentee ballots. Do we have those defined?
I was gonna say, I didn't see.
They are
it.
defined in here.
Are they?
Right, on A1, 2, and 3 on page 17.
Oh, you stinker.
And the observer is on the top of page 18.
Put in the definitions.
Yeah, I think there's not a true definition in the code sense, but in terms of looking at where they're going to be and what they can do, a pretty clear distinction.
Okay, I have a couple questions on this section.
Of course.
Sometimes we use the word watcher and sometimes poll watcher. So I
I
think it should
actually
really
just-
be consistent.
I made that note.
Okay.
I have quite a few notes that as we go through.
And what were you recommending?
I think that it should be poll watcher.
I do too, because watcher just doesn't do it. And I think the traditional one used throughout the United States is more poll watcher, but anyway, that's one of the things I wanted to point out. The other one is I have a couple, on the top of page 18, number 3, you talk about a candidate or an organization, but on the previous 1 and 2, you talk about an organized group. Was there supposed to be an organized group in 3 as well, so that you're consistent in 1, 2, and 3?
All right, so in 3, I essentially conceptually combine organization or organized group by referring to them both as organization. I don't think there's a real difference between the two as a matter of practice in the code or by definition, but I can certainly add that to 3.
Well, to me, organized group means someone maybe who has a PAC, a political action committee, for or opposed a referendum, or, a question or whatever.
And what I think happened, here's the difference. An organization probably has some sort of official corporate status with the state. They're an LLC or not, a nonprofit or a C corporate, whatever it is. Whereas an organized group might be 15 citizens who get together and sponsor something. So they don't have a corporate status, so they're not an organization in the legal sense. But for purposes of this code, they both have similar obligations in terms of they want people to be observers. They can do that if they follow this process. But I can certainly add organized group to 3 to make that a little bit easier to follow.
Just
To be
pointing
clear,
out that
there's no
it wasn't,
distinction.
it wasn't consistent, that's all I was pointing out. And then also, under C, where it talks about watchers, on page 18, you talk about them being registered, the watcher or the poll watcher or the observer would be registered. I don't see anywhere in here where that information is provided to the precinct. So I'm wondering if, is that in there and I just didn't see it, or?
So the registration that the poll watchers receive is the name badge, and on the back of the name badge, it has the information from the clerk's office.
Oh, okay.
So
Yes, I
in
didn't see
C1,
Mm-hmm.
where it says election officials at the polling locations may require the watcher to present ID and proof of registration. So in fact, that's exactly what happened last year. They have a badge, and the front of the badge says Jane Doe. And so they have to present ID to the election official at the precinct to show that, in fact, I am Jane Doe. And the election official may look at the back of the badge, and the back of the badge says Organization Political Action Group XYZ. And so that's why it's on a badge, because we don't, it's considered campaigning if you can see the back of the badge. So that's why only the front can be displayed.
And that was going to be my question, because I didn't know what identification meant, like a driver's license or registration, registered in the precinct, registered in the state. I understand it now. I didn't pick that up in there as to what that meant.
May I say that there's some typos on this, the same page while we're at it, 19.
Uh-oh.
3A,
3A on 19?
on page 19,
Oh, yeah.
shall not make or received phone
Yeah,
calls.
got it.
Just a little thing. You want us to worry with those little things?
Yes.
Yeah, I want to know about it.
And there's another one on 2A that says received.
Yeah.
On the bottom of that page, it should be received.
2A at the bottom.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Got it.
And there's a word missing under 3 on the other page.
When you say other page, you mean the next
Say-
page?
On page 18, I mean,
Okay.
you know, where it says, I swear or affirm.
This is at line 27?
It's the fourth line down, right. Oh, I'm sorry, I saw the numbers now. I was, should be on line 30 where I think it should say social security numbers or the last 4 digits, not or last 4, or should it say or the, or whatever.
We can do either,
It's okay.
odd.
It just says, such as social security. It's different.
So we'll have to update that.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
different from what we used last year, but
What
it's
they're,
the same.
what they're talking about, just to make it clear on the record, is that the form that we did here was something we wrote fairly quickly, I guess I would say, in April during the election. And so when we came around to codifying this language, it's different than this form, so we're going to change this form once this is approved. So we know exactly how to write it.
To understand the ramifications of changes that we see today, how do you implement them before they go to the assembly on 7th?
Well, if they're simply technical, like these ones are, we'll just present them in either an S version or as 4 amendments, depending on how many there are. If there's something substantive, then we'll describe it as a recommendation. Maybe we'll do them all as recommendations.
See, you go through all this work because you've done a good job and
Yeah.
all this little stuff.
No, it's all important. It needs to be done.
And that's,
And I actually anticipated that there might have been an S or an S, but they actually do S1s and
I know.
S2s. So to have an S, and that's probably part of the purpose of having the 2 public hearings, we wanted plenty of opportunity to make all of these corrections.
and this is one of the reasons that we have invited so many eyes to review this document, because we want to catch all these things before it goes into code, so.
And the code reviser, which is
Yeah.
my office, has the ability to make some corrections as long as they're not substantive changes. So, for
You
example,
just answered a question I was going to have.
fixing some of these things we can do during the process of getting it published.
Rosemary used to.
I know the statutes have a revisor as well, so I was assuming you did, so. And I have one more thing about this particular section, if I may. On page 20 on the top, where you say computer system, do you want to be more specific? And is it the state voter registration database that you're referring to there? Under C at the top of the page, line 2.
Yeah, in that case, I was actually trying not to be too specific.
Okay.
Because I don't know how many systems or systems you may have at any
Okay.
given time, but they're allowed to ask questions about whatever that system or systems
Okay.
is.
I have a question here. One of the problems in the last election was people hanging over you, and I know that the clerk can move them back, but how can they see the computer when there's 2 of us and there's 3 computers and it's all jammed against the wall? So I wondered if that needed to be in there, or they would be jamming again, and they got into some personal information of some of the voters.
Well, we know that there's a possibility they're going to see confidential information, which is why they sign these sorts of things. And so we know there's proximity issues there that we'll have to manage.
We're going to get a better room next year.
Could be, might have a better room.
Oh.
Yeah.
I can already tell you there is not going to be a better room by next year.
All right.
We just have space limitations, so, we could maybe rearrange the room, but, it's not gonna be a different room.
No, I figured it would be the same. I saw the logistical problem with the people putting in, you didn't push that button, and they were, I know you will calm that down this year.
But that is a different issue. And the issue that of an observer or a watcher telling an election official or a commissioner that you didn't do something is entirely inappropriate. And we know that that is not their role. Their role is to observe or watch. And so we need to, we did run interference as much as possible last year. However, I wasn't in the room the entire time because I couldn't be. But we can continue to come up with procedural ways to deal with that. But I think it's really clear that if they can't have cell phones and all of the other things, and we've said that they may ask brief questions, but telling you didn't do something isn't appropriate. And the other technique that we developed, consistent with other jurisdictions, is we ask them to write down their questions, which I do think helped a little bit, that the observers wrote down their questions and then we looked at them and discussed them with you. And I think that worked better than having them asking you questions while you're in the middle of working on something. So we hope we can address those issues in that fashion.
Joyce made an interesting comment in the middle of that go around. If they wrote, well, and I read this, and they are not to take any paper out. I can't remember. I read this on the plane. I can't tell you the details of what you wrote down. She recommended that if they took notes, that they should be returned. And I don't know whether they were, and what good does that do a week later? And so I wondered, not in the work itself, but maybe for the clerk, so you could refer to it, this is what the procedures are that the clerk follows.
So I've heard a couple of things. As far as the procedures that the clerk follows, one of the things that I think Amanda and Dennis mentioned is that we're going to have some
Booklet, yeah.
guides. So those will be published. But your question about writing things down and taking them with them is a different issue. And I'm going to ask Dennis to address that. I think it comes up in two circumstances. So one circumstance is the watchers at the polling locations when they write information down. And then the second one is the observers writing information down. And so I think I'm going to ask Dennis if he could address that.
Yeah, that's a good one. On the one hand, you certainly don't want observers or watchers to write down personal information to then be used for some other purpose outside of ensuring a fair and open election. On the other hand, I'm concerned about the potential constitutional implications of telling people they can't at least gather enough information to present their case later. If they see something and want to keep enough detail to remember what it is they saw that they need to get addressed, you seize that information from them. That makes me quite nervous. So I think our intent is to use the guide to help us manage that. This sort of anticipates that, again, like they're going to see some information. Is there a difference between somebody memorizing a number and misusing it versus writing it down and misusing it? Well, we've got to be careful not to overthink this. There's an opportunity there once they see it to do something they shouldn't, which is why we put it in code, some criminal elements in case that's abused. So Did I give you an answer, or did I avoid answering the question? I don't know that we have an absolute prohibition at this point on note-taking. I think there's a boundary there that we probably can't cross.
I have a question. By the way, I think you did a fabulous job of redoing this. It's great. Maybe minor changes. But just for a point of clarification for me, the state Title 15 elections, and I know you don't have that, I don't think you have that with you, Section 1507095. It states the following information set out in the state voter registration records is confidential and is not open to public inspection, okay? And then it gives those identifiers that we use. And I see all of this stuff in here, and I went to the state and I asked them questions about how their actual procedure is on that stuff, and was, it was wonderful to know that. So, but it looks like we are not, what am I saying? We are not being particular because it is open to public inspection when the watchers look at those things with
The difference is that somebody can't simply walk in and ask to look through the computer and spend their time looking at all the information.
Okay.
The only way they get to do it is they are a registered observer or watcher.
So
that
it's
we
the
have it-
difference between a watcher and a public observer and a public inspector.
Yes. Yeah, we've got a defined subgroup. They've got to be attached to a candidate or attached to a group. They've registered with the clerk's office. They've signed an agreement, so we can track that person. They're only entitled to look at the information necessary to fulfill their duty as an observer or watcher, which is different than somebody just coming in off the street and asking to look at anything on the computer.
Okay.
Yeah, so.
Thank you.
And just to clarify too, our office worked closely with Julie Hussman at the Divisions of Elections Region 2 as far as their procedures as they go through and have observers, and they do follow the same, they require them to sign the sheet, to sign in, to sign the confidentiality agreement, but the observers are in the room with the election officials that are reviewing the information, so they do have access to see the stuff on the screens, but they don't allow the recording devices and stuff like that. Okay. So.
I know I'm not a member of this committee, but I got a question for you, Barbara, because it's going to come to me eventually. Page 20, line 7 says may be removed from a location. Do you need to specify who will direct the removal? Like the deputy clerk, or I would just want somebody in there that they could say, well, we didn't know who would have it removed. I want a name in there of an official, the clerk or the deputy clerk or the precinct. I just want to make sure there's somebody's name put in there.
So it could say at the direction of the municipal clerk.
That would be fine.
The issue here is if the election commission tells us that someone is bothering them, they can tell, I think, Emily worked with you for a while, Amanda was in the room, I was in the room. You can tell anyone on the clerk's staff that someone is bothering you or behaving inappropriately, and the clerk's office will do that. And we have had security at the election commission meetings in the past, and security has stood outside the door, and we will call APB. So if you
I
want,
would just like to see by direction of the clerk.
all right.
So if you
So
look,
that way we have somebody.
yeah, if you look at page 19 at the top, lines 1 and 2, for the watchers at the polling locations, we said the election officials or the municipal clerk may request assistance of law enforcement for the purpose, that is the removal of somebody. So I could add something to E to make that more clear.
If we make it a little bit more clear, I just want them to be somebody like the clerk that's directed to have a person removed. Because otherwise you're going to have somebody that wants to throw a fit about it. And I want them to be, the clerk to be able to remove whoever's bothering you guys, because it gets crazy.
So another highlight that I wanted to point out was page 22 of 43. Line 26, this is an issue that has been coming up over the past couple years. When we have voters who request a ballot by mail, we then have interested parties who want to have the list of all the voters who have requested the ballots by mail, and they want to have their residence address, the address that the ballot was sent to. And the clerk's office has worked with municipal attorney over the last couple of years to address this, because I think it provides a huge security risk if you are requesting a ballot to be sent to Hawaii and someone requests this list and sees that you're not at your residence, you're in Hawaii. So we have added that the name and residence of the voter is public record, and if the residence address is confidential in the state system, then we won't release that information. We'll release the PO box that they provide with the state, but it allows us to only release the residence address and not actually the address which the ballot is being mailed to, so.
And Amanda, what about on the bottom of page 22? I know that's new language down there about voting absentee or by facsimile or email.
Mm-hmm.
What does it mean requests received after this time need not be processed? I guess I'm,
So the concern was that if you made it mandatory that every request that came in after the deadline had to be satisfied, the point was, you want to set a hard deadline that's mandatory in the clerk's office. They have an obligation to respond to those requests if the requests are timely received. If the request is not timely received and the clerk's office is in the throes of trying to get the election up and running, going, they'll do everything they can to satisfy those requests, but it should be viewed as mandatory, for which they then are accused of having violated the law for not meeting that request. If a late request comes in and they can meet it, they got the resources to do it, they'll try. But that's not a guarantee that that's going to happen.
There was a robust conversation that surrounded this issue because we want to make it possible for people to vote, and we want to make it possible to allow as many people to vote, but we did have some concerns that potentially there would be a slam on the office, and either, intentionally or, unintentionally, and all of a sudden the clerk's office receives 100, 200, 1,000 requests for absentee by mail, fax ballots, and there's no way that we can process all of those in the time provided. We want to be able to have an out, but we also want to close the gap between the time, because currently as code stands, you have to request a ballot 7 days before the election, by mail or by fax. And over the last couple of years, our office has dealt with so many issues where people unexpectedly got called out of state or were out of state and were anticipating they would make it back, and they didn't make it back, and they weren't able to vote. And our goal is to allow people to vote, but we do have, and we've seen things happen in the last couple of years as far as encouraging people to vote in certain ways, and we want to make sure that there's not any direction that the clerk's office is not able to fulfill,
So there are two things that I would add to that. One is last year, we got a request for a mail ballot to go to somewhere in Tennessee, and it isn't a city or a town that I even remember. So I think we can relate that the citizen called me and he ended up with a postmarked document. And, it was postmarked, it took, the by mail board starts their work, like 2 weeks ahead of time. So it was like, probably 5 days after the person submitted the request before the document was mailed. But it was 10 days before it was received somewhere in Tennessee. And, we can understand that, and most Alaskans probably do understand that it can take that long. Well, he was really angry and said that, he had gone on from that location, so he didn't get to vote. Well, if we had had this provision in the code, we could have faxed or emailed a ballot to him, so he still could have voted with this code change. So that goes to what Amanda's saying. We're trying to accommodate people in that situation. And then the second thing that I wanted to tell you is the way that I anticipate that the clerk's office will implement this is first in, first served. So we're gonna start at, 7 days before, we're gonna do all those, we're gonna do the 6, we're gonna do the 5 days before, we're gonna do 4 days before, we're gonna do 3. If at day 4, we have, let's say, 2,000, we'll stop. We can't process any more than that before Election Day. We're not gonna pick and choose, we're gonna do it fairly and objectively, and that's the plan. I think the number that we've had in the past, I think we're probably gonna get to all of them. I really do, but I think that there could be a situation in any election where someone tries to, to do something to the process or something, and then that way, if we get 1,000 requests the day before, we won't be able to do this, and we appreciate the municipal attorney drafting it in this way, that we're not mandated to do that, because we just couldn't do it.
And we've had a series of conversations in our office and with the chair of the Ethics and Elections Committee, along with the chair of the Assembly, about how we would communicate to the public should a situation like this arise. If we are no longer able to process anymore, and how we would get that information out, because it would be important to let people know that they would need to make other arrangements, so.
You
I
need
guess
to go
my
to your
con-
polling location,
Right.
because we will not be able to process a fax ballot if you send it the day before the election.
I guess my concern was it's a negative statement, and you always want to be positive when you're talking about voting. So it sounds like, if I were to read that, I go, well, I don't think I'll turn one in, but maybe if you said something, requests received after this time will be processed subject to the availability of staff. See what I mean? So you're putting those two sentences together,
I think we
so you're
can-
not making it sound so like, need not be processed. I mean, it sounds really negative. Guess that was my point. Not so much with the process, so.
I think we can do something like that, yeah.
Yeah, it just sounds better to me in a positive manner versus a negative.
So that leads me to the question, what about the request must be received not less than 7 days? Can we fix that not there too?
I stumbled over that one.
Well, we can say must be received prior to 7 days.
If you take out all the lawyer language, what fun is it?
I mean, prior to, that sounds
Yeah.
better than not less.
Yeah,
I
or
didn't
just
pick that one
say-
up so much, but the need not be processed just jumped out at me like, whoa.
I'll see if I can find a way to say that
Okay.
better.
Would be too picky,
No, it's okay.
No, yeah, it's really good feedback so far.
We want to be able to understand it, and we want the public to be able to understand it. It's really hard, like the prior section, when Amanda has tried to explain this to, campaigns. She's telling campaigns, this information is confidential, I can't provide it to you. And so these are people that are knowledgeable about elections, and we don't want to argue with them about it. We want it to be clear.
That's always very good. I know. I have a couple of things too. You've changed, I would like to go back to page 12 if we could, because you changed a polling place to a polling location. Does that change anything? To me, a place means like this room, where a location means something different. So I just want to make sure you're still talking about the same thing. I mean, I'm just throwing it out. I don't know if there is a nuance to those two words that are not the same. So is that something that's being changed?
If you look at the bottom of page 12, I think that's where you referred me to, that subsection A.
Mhm.
So sometimes the code uses the word polls, like in line 38.
Mhm.
Sometimes it uses polling place, like at line 39. So we just agreed to make it all one thing. We settled on using polling location.
Okay.
So instead of
So it's
using
not
polls-
changing anything the way?
No,
the
it's
way
just
it
trying to
is?
clean up the language, so it's all
Okay.
one thing.
Well, there are quite a few pages where it still said polling place, so you might want to go through and change that. I can tell you after the meeting, I picked out the ones as I was reading through it, so
Okay.
I don't want to go through it now.
Yeah, thank
I
you.
just wanted to make sure there was not a change in the way that was being looked at by a word change. And then one other picky thing, and then I'll be quiet for a few minutes.
No, this is great. Thank you.
On page 6, You've got new language in there regarding review and challenge of candidate qualifications. Really, C through J is referring to B, and I'm wondering if it should be like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, you know what I'm, because it's really referring to that particular section. It's all talking about the complaint in writing, and that to me just makes it clearer that it's in there, so I'm just throwing that out for a suggestion. So C through J
Right.
might want to be 1 through 8. I deal with statutes all the time, so I'm kind of picky, so I'm sorry.
And that's something we tried to do of make it this sort of cookbook style, which that
It's easier.
does address that.
And then my one other point, and I know I said I was done, but I have one other point. Some of them in here, when you've added new language, you've started out like an A with a small letter and some with large letters, and that's another, to me, a point that they should all kind of be consistent.
They should be. The first letter is a capital,
Right,
then followed by a number, followed by a small.
right.
Yeah, so if we've missed some of those,
Okay, whatever.
we should
I'll
definitely fix them. The
point
code
them out.
revisor can do it too.
Okay.
Yeah.
While we're on this page, may I?
Page 6,
7.
7, yeah.
F. The director.
Yeah, I have that one
Yeah.
too.
Oh, okay. Is that
Municipal clerk.
the clerk?
Why didn't you catch that?
You gotta get some of us up there reading stuff.
This is good.
More eyes see things, it's amazing.
And that's what we want. We want all eyes on this. So,
I have another one on page 25.
I have one on 14. Shall
Oh,
we
go
go
ahead,
in
go
numerical
ahead.
order
Let's
or
do that
not?
one. Yep.
Line 24. Secrecy sleeve. You were changing it someplace else. And so I'll just highlight it.
There's a secrecy envelope and a secrecy sleeve. So there is a difference. But we can search and make sure that we're using the
what?
right language in the right place.
Yeah, so in this particular spot, the sleeve is that hard cardboard gizmo
Oh,
that
was
you
in the
use to feed your
AccuVote.
ballot into the
Yeah.
AccuVote.
Oh.
Yeah, and then the envelopes,
yeah.
you know, have to
Yeah,
do with,
they're
you fill out the
great.
back of the envelope, and that's,
That's where they put the ballot.
Okay.
Okay, I have page 25 on line 46. Well, first of all, on line 44, you talk about the oval or the square, but then when you go down, you mark on line 46, you just mention oval. Is it supposed to be a square there as well?
let's see here.
I don't either. I don't know where the square comes in unless it's on a paper checkoff or something.
Is this 8B?
And that, the square language might just be 8A. That we can maybe delete.
Oh, okay, I wasn't sure where the square came in, but one says oval or the square and the other one just said oval, so I was just trying to get it
Yeah.
consistent. I wasn't
Yeah,
sure.
no, you're right, it should be consistent, and probably
Yeah.
the better way to go is to get rid of the square unless.
But, and so there's a couple squares on.
Yeah.
Yeah,
There
there
is.
are, yes.
26, oh, page 26. I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
There's B and C have square.
Okay.
And then on the top of page 24,
And 5.
where it's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5,
I'm sorry, what page?
on top of page 24, where starting on line 6, where it goes, the numbers are
Yes.
the sections, it should only be 1, 2, and number 3 should be crossed out because that sentence continues on to 3.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, it's top of page 24.
Right, so where it
Page
starts,
1 through 5.
okay, where it says number 1, remove the ballot, number 2, place the ballot, number 3, it says,
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
you're
2
right.
says place the
You're
ballot
right.
in, yeah,
Yes.
okay.
Okay, I got another little crinky one.
Are
On
you back?
14, I'm kind of slow.
20, well, when we're on 24 and 25, I have a question.
Okay.
And we'll go back.
I probably suggest that we try to, if we keep it in numerical order, we're doing That was the sleeve. Line 39.
I'm sorry, what page?
14. Line 39.
Okay.
A private cause of action in the voter, by the voter.
I actually think it's in legalese.
I won't argue with you.
Yeah.
And this is a question for Amanda.
Yes.
Deposit, this is the first line, same page, shall be sealed and deposited in the secure container. Is that those big black bags?
Which line? Top of
We
the
actually
top.
use the blue municipal totes for the question ballots at the polling locations, which is why we changed the language to secure container, because it's not the ballot box in the sense of the black ballot box that people think of. And so we just provide a secure container.
And it may be
Change-
blue
change
totes this
totes.
year,
Yeah,
and it may
that's
be
what I was gonna
something
say.
else, so we thought this was, more progressive language.
In a marked secure container? It says secure container on it, or whatever we're doing. See, I get lost.
It doesn't say secure container on it.
No, but it says.
I think we're just trying to address that we're not putting them in any just willy-nilly, but in something that is secure, but it potentially could be different at each polling place.
And it could be different with a different clerk or a different deputy clerk, but we just want to make sure that it is a container and that it is secure. But no, that's okay. I think we need to talk about these. They're really important. Then in the training that Amanda does, the training goes into a great deal of detail, and they probably spent pages in the training about which container that is and how you keep it secure.
And the other thing, and jump in here, because I was thinking, maybe I'm wrong on this, I'm not sure, but if you look at page 12, election supplies and equipment, subsection B talks about providing ballot boxes at the polling locations. So I was thinking those are the boxes under the AccuVote scanner, right? The thing on 13 and 14 is the question ballots. Those don't go into that ballot box. They go into this other thing we're calling the secure container. So that's why I deleted ballot box at top of page 14.
I'll be quiet.
No,
Sorry.
don't be quiet.
No,
It's
no, no.
really important.
Yeah.
This is exactly what we're doing.
I get lost in it though sometimes.
No, please.
I have a question for page 29, line 14. It's changed, the election officials shall review question and absentee envelopes. That's our job, correct? Are we sure we want to change it from commission to officials?
I'll let Dennis go ahead and speak to
Okay, let's find your,
Page 29.
no, I've got that part. I'm looking for, oops, not too far. I'm looking for the code site for your powers and duties. Okay, so the powers and duties are on page 38, in the middle of the page. So what we did there in number 6, we talked about reviewing the results of the election officials' tabulation. And then on this page 29, we're talking about review question marks and ballot envelopes. And so we're making a distinction between the review of the tabulation versus the review of the actual envelopes themselves. And the review of question and absentee envelopes isn't always necessarily required to be done by the commission under this code. So we made it more generic. election officials review, question and absentee envelopes, whatever.
Under the new code,
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
not necessarily us, is what you're saying?
Right.
Is that for flexibility?
I believe that's what we're looking at, yeah.
Can you address that more fully? Or just, I'm not following you quite.
Okay, so what is it that the by-mail board, for example, does? What are they reviewing?
The by mail vote.
Board. They're reviewing the envelopes, right? Some of the envelopes that you get that are absentee, right?
By mail ones, yeah.
Right. So do you guys then review those envelopes again? Probably not, right? So they are election officials that are reviewing those, and you guys are working on the tabulation results, and those are all processed along with everything else that gets processed.
We currently do all of the question envelopes.
Right, but the code, what we made is, that may be true, I don't know the particulars, but this speaks to both question and absentee envelopes. So if there's some division, so where some officials other than the commission are reviewing these kinds of envelopes, this code on page 29 makes that okay. Otherwise, if we follow the literal text on page 38 as it currently is, nobody else can do it but the commission. And that's not really what's happening right now. There are other election officials that are reviewing some of the envelopes.
Okay, so the difference then is the election commission is not the only one reviewing envelopes, but they are the ones that are making the final determination as to whether it is accepted or not.
Right.
So you're looking at a, okay.
Right.
Exactly.
Because I was kind of questioning this as well, as to, I didn't quite understand what was going on here.
Right.
So at your public canvas, you guys are doing the heavy lifting. That is exactly what you're doing. That was the hardest, one of the hardest days of my life, watching the decisions that you had to make on all of those items that we had on that list to decide whether or not to count those votes. And that's what you're doing. That is the key part of your job, and that is exactly the same.
Well, in view of that, I have a concern because this, on page 29, it says that other election officials can review the question ballots. Our investigation, our review of those question ballots, which are the questionable ones, determines our ability to make a decision at that canvas that you're talking about. Perhaps we could break it up. Do you understand what I'm saying, Dennis?
First of all, we don't look at the ballots, we look at the envelopes, right?
That's true.
Right, which is why we changed the text here.
Okay.
I understand what you're saying. I think what we were trying to do is make sure that you guys have that final review requirement, but that to the extent that election officials, however they're designated, are involved in the process, there isn't a grounds for election contest because they looked at it, made an initial determination that then goes to you guys.
On the mail-in ones, yes.
On either. Because we're not talking about just what happens today, but what happens in 2 years or 3 years or 5 years in terms of what's the best way to manage the process. So if there's some sort of initial review, and then you guys make final determinations, I don't want someone to challenge that initial review because of the way the code is currently written. I want there to be some flexibility here so that election officials who do these reviews and then you guys do the final, that's an okay process. Right now, there's no provision in here other than you review question and absentee ballots. Well, you don't review the ballots, and if you're the only one authorized in the code to do the review, then we can't do the other things you do with the other election officials. So this is trying to allow that two-step.
Okay, so my question is then, are we election officials when we are
Yes.
members of the election
Yes,
commission?
you are.
Where does it say that?
Election
In the
officials is
definition,
defined.
Yeah, I saw that.
And where is that?
Uh,
I guess that was my
front.
concern.
So it's on page 2, right in the middle, lines 21 through 24. And that's current code too, I mean, no change to that. Election official has always included the election commission. And I just changed it to board.
Where are we on? Oh, I see it now, okay.
Yeah. So you guys have always been considered election officials. Well, I shouldn't say always, but certainly under current code you are, and we're not making any change to that.
Okay, I didn't realize that was in there. So, okay, so does that mean then we are required, is training required? Is,
It is not. We have looked at, we've looked at the state provision that does require it.
okay. Just an aside, that's all. Okay. All right, well, that makes sense then, because I agreed with Gwen. I was a little concerned as to what was happening with that when the commission was taking that. Okay.
Okay, I'm not sure that this has happened. There was so much going on. We went over all of the ballots we received that were questioned, didn't we?
Yes.
And we found that some that had been passed, we didn't agree
Other
Uh,
with.
election officials
Officials,
we did not
we didn't
agree
agree
with.
with.
On numerous occasions.
Right.
And that is still in here as part of our process.
Right now, you shall have the duty of reviewing the results of the election officials' tabulation. So to the extent that there's some challenge, for example, at the canvass, you have to be, your job is to figure that out and adjust the tabulation.
Isn't the tabulation, though, a little bit different than approving or not approving an absentee envelope for completeness or whatever? Or am I not looking at that in the right way? Or are we
Just a
talking about
list of
something
numbers?
totally different?
I'd say that there are two duties. The one duty that you do is at the public canvas, making those decisions whether or not those other election officials, if you're gonna count those or not. But then you have the second duty of your report, and the report that you submit to the assembly has the tabulations.
Right, so under your duties on page 38, you serve as the canvas board. And you're under 288030, you see how the canvas board operates and what they look at. And you're dealing with challenges to question or absentee voters.
On page 38, line 30, right? Is that what you're saying?
Page 38, line 24, A3, you serve as the canvas board, right? So you deal with those challenges. And then you also, under 6 of that same section, review the results.
Okay, and then he's referring to right here, Gwen, where it says the public session of the canvas, which does talk about declaring which absentee and question ballots will be rejected and which shall be counted.
That's right.
So he's referring to the word canvas here, to the canvas.
I don't know about you guys, but I'm a little bit concerned if other people are reviewing those question ballots. I mean, like you, that canvas board was hot seat time. We couldn't at that point go over a review. You know what I mean? If we're not doing the review of the question ballots.
I think there's a couple of, for example, last year, because we had an odd number, we had someone from the clerk's office, another election official, sat in with you so that we had 6 instead of 5. So that's one issue that this would solve. The other thing is the canvas started did we start at 6 or 7? And it doesn't have to be that way. You know, the canvas, for example, could start at, 1 in the afternoon and go until 5 or 6. It could be more like a work session. And I expect, the other one that I wanted to point out is, I think this brings this provision more in line with the state, the way the state reviews question and absentee ballots.
If I remember right, some of what we did is we actually had been able, with using the election officials to help us with this, including the clerks, is we gave you categories of ballots, right? These ballots they voted out of district, or whatever they were, or there was a missing signature of the election official on the envelope, whatever it was. So someone's got to do that work, And this avoids a challenge that says, well, the commission didn't do that work.
So if we had
But you guys
sit
are
in
still-
to make a pair, that kind of a thing.
When we receive it, we could still do it. I know what you're talking about, when they came down with this list that we, as a group, sat around and talked about. It was nice to have those put into categories for us to judge at that point, and I think that's what it's covering.
Yeah, these 27 have all the same problem. Our decision is to count or not to count, right? And you're able to do that because another election official has taken the first cut at that. Now, if they've made a mistake, hopefully somebody in the process says, oh, that's in the wrong category, or somebody in the audience, public session canvas goes, wait. That's where you guys make the final call.
Are you I'm not satisfied, but yeah, go ahead.
So what I would say is that if as a group, you want to recommend some other change, we can do it a number of different ways, but they would all require you to as a body, come to some decision to just either raise it as a concern or to actually create specific language, just so you know, as a group, there's a recommendation, hopefully, one way or the other.
Which would then be submitted to the assembly on the 17th, is that what you're saying?
We would really like it before the 17th.
Well, sure.
Well, yeah.
By the 17th.
Okay,
Yes.
I have a quickie. and I
Just
think-
one question pursuing on that. You were saying that the state has other election officials that handle the mailed-in ballots and the question ballots, and then it goes to the election commission for that final kind of process. Are you intending to go that direction? To have other people
You know,
verify?
here are a couple of issues that we have, is that, number one, you worked your tails off last year. And one of the dilemmas that we have is we had 20% voter turnout. What if we had 50% voter turnout? The bottom line is the commission could not have completed the work that would have been assigned to you in that tiny window of time before certification. So that is one of the important issues, but we need you to do the work of the canvas. And I don't think that last year, partially, I acknowledge that I was new, that we adequately prepared you for what happened in the public canvas, which is truly the focus of your work. And we need to make sure that from before the election until that public canvas, whatever that entails, that you're prepared for that. And it may involve reviewing, spot checking, reviewing other people reviewing work. It could involve a lot of things, but those are the dilemmas that I think we face and you face, having this enormous amount of work where we had a fairly low voter turnout. You would have to ask the assembly to postpone certification. And that Saturday was horrible when we worked until, what, was it 11 o'clock or
11:30.
midnight? 11:30 at night. It's just not realistic. We need more people to do the work. And that's what we're asking, like when Emily was able to come down and partner, or I'm not sure if it was Emily, but it was one of the clerk staff, could just come down and partner with you to make sure that we were getting the work done. That's what we're trying to ensure with this. And lots of things, the watchers, the observers, the criminal violations, and this provision, among many others, we're trying to make sure that we're recognizing where the municipal code has come from, but trying to make sure that our procedures and processes are as consistent as possible with the state. And this is one of those that would keep us slightly more consistent with the state.
I have a comment. It was really wonderful to have that help. It was amazing. But one thing that we employed was that we had one commissioner paired with one that was, you know, a clerk or whatever, clerk's office stuff. I don't know if that.
As a procedural matter,
Yeah.
we absolutely could do that.
Yeah.
I have a quickie, it's on page 25. And it says no person, oh, this is line 18. No person handling a ballot after it has been taken from the ballot box may have a marking device in hand other than a stamp for rejecting ballots. No person handling the ballots may remove a ballot. Well, that's obvious. But I guess we haven't had a stamp for the rejection in the past.
This
And
is not our thing. This is when they manually count the votes.
at the polling place.
This is also a lot of the work that our by mail board does when they facsimile ballots.
Okay, this is fine, but don't you have to have some kind of instrument to write with if you are tallying votes? I mean, I know when we count our group, you can't do anything to change the ballot, but this group here is 28, so the next person has to count. And if they don't get 28, the next person counts till we get the accurate number. And we have to record it in some way.
So when we did the hand count this spring, we didn't want anyone to have writing utensils because we didn't want anyone to have the potential to change the ballots. And so we manually counted by sorting into boxes, and Barbara did a final count and kept the tally sheet. So we did not want people to have writing utensils for the potential to alter a ballot. And then the final person, Barbara, wasn't ever sitting at the table where we were doing the counting.
That's where you're using the box lids, right, with the names
Yeah.
on them?
Okay, I'm not following, but
This concerns manual counting of votes, so
when you're out of the envelopes.
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm still in the envelopes.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then on page 30, I had a concern. I know we brought this up at the last meeting, and I'm not sure, evidently, there was not a word that fit in there, but it's on line 38 where it talks about an improper ballot. And then it talks about a proper ballot. Improper just sounds so, I don't know. Is there any way you could say uses an out-of-district ballot? And then on line 40 where it says using a proper, it would say using an in-district ballot? Does that make sense, or?
Well, I understand that you don't like the word improper. I get that. I'm not sure that all improper ballots are just the out of district.
I'm not
I
following.
mean, well, is there a situation where you're going to have an incorrect or improper ballot that's not an out of district ballot?
There was a service
Yes.
area, or if they were.
Right, so improper is broader, covers more possibilities.
My
It makes it
note
sound like
says-
it makes it sound like the vote. It kind of sounds like the voter pull out a ballot out of their
Exactly.
pocket, right? I kind of sneak the ballot in, right? And then we're certainly not trying to say that.
Okay.
But you're right. I didn't come up with a better word.
I know we talked about it, and I
Yeah.
couldn't, my notes weren't clear as to why we didn't come up with anything, but
Yeah,
okay.
I have a question on that page. Let's see, line 24, so that's page 30, line 24. Properly execute, does that mean sign?
Yeah, typically. It may. it may include the identifiers,
Yeah.
right? So
that's why you use the word.
So if they're missing the identifiers, they've not properly executed the certificate.
Some of those seem confusing. There were, let's see, one.
And that's old language, there's
I was
nothing
gonna
to
say
do.
it was lawyer talk, isn't it?
And you see in the next couple of lines, we added that, which the commission asked after the public canvas. Lines
Oh, yes.
26 through 29, that was added because of the election commission, so
That's great.
thank you for
I
that.
think that's great, yeah. I'll go there. On page 38, the language would be, it starts on page 40, or on line 49 and goes on to the next page, is the exact same language that is in several of the ones following. I don't see any need to have B in there at all. Because it goes into what the, the powers of the municipal clerk, it goes into that.
Yeah.
It's
So
just,
what I tried to do there is that first bit, A and B, 150.10, is our policy statements. And then I have the code that does the same thing next to it. Like we say, there's some sense of redundancy there. But what it does is, to the extent the code that follows doesn't cover everything that could happen under the policy. The court could look at the policy statement and say, look, the policy was to do this. What she did is close enough to the code and within the intent of the policy, so it's still okay. So I'm trying to cover a scenario where the code that follows maybe misses a circumstance or doesn't cover every scenario. A court can go back to the policy and say, look, what she did meets the intent, even though it may not be literally in the code that follows.
okay, makes sense.
And admittedly, this is this thing here, the emergency plan, I can see coming back to later to tweak it here and there. It's all brand new.
Dropbox.
How many
The whole
hours?
thing?
Pardon me?
Is the term Dropbox, or is the idea of a Dropbox new?
Yes.
It is,
Barbara and I traveled to Washington this summer, and we visited with the Washington Secretary of State designee and toured their by-mail voting facility and explored the possibility of having by-mail elections. And one thing that they have within all of the counties in Washington is a designated drop box. So if you receive a ballot by mail, you don't have to mail it back. You could go to the designated drop box. But we have had a few robust conversations about, encouraging more people to participate in municipal elections by voting by mail, and if maybe moving to a point where we put one in each district for ease of use if we are going to a stronger by mail voter participation, and then if in the future we ever go to an all by mail election, we already have that addressed. So
I think it's a new thing, kind of, isn't it?
Mhm.
Because businesses are doing it for their bills.
it's very interesting with the Washington by mail. They said that one of the biggest issues with the by mail elections was college students didn't know where to get stamps.
Didn't even know what a stamp
I was
was.
just gonna say, and they're in college.
So we wanted to just move in that.
They could email it.
So
But does this increase the activity needed from the clerk's office because somebody's got to pick them up?
we haven't moved as forward into actually implementing it. We're just addressing it in the code as of now. And I do think if we do move to a place of implementing it, we would address staffing issues if needed.
and I think Mr. Trainee has even brought this up before, whether we'd have a law enforcement officer probably would participate in picking that up. So it would be,
I want security
Yeah.
to make sure that it's as safe and clean as possible.
And if you did service areas, and someday they're done at a different time than the regular election, and you had drop boxes for those, then that might work pretty good.
The state of Washington has close to 86% participation in their elections. So it's interesting, the move to by-mail elections, what that does for voter turnout. So.
On page 31, it's not exactly on D, line 20,
30, page 31.
31, line 20. As I said, it's not exactly my question, but when the notice is sent out to the voters that their vote was not counted, that it was rejected, I'm confused in the body of this as to when that happens. That happens before the canvass or after the canvass? Because what's the point if the people don't know that their vote is rejected? They have no recourse.
We have an interesting challenge there because if you remember last year, leading up to the canvass, votes were still being rejected minutes before the canvass.
Yes.
So there's no possible way. And so I think the intent of the clerk's office and the election commission is to notify everyone as soon as possible so they have the opportunity. But this is new. It didn't start until 2011 that we even began to mail the letters out before the canvass, before that.
Which that would lend to the consideration of having help getting through the question ballots in a timely manner so that it could be sent out, right?
Right.
Because, like I said, what's the point of the canvass if they haven't even been notified that they're,
But
other than the,
And I
the
think we don't want to
organizations.
get caught in a section with the code there that we can't do. And so I think that is somewhat vague as far as exactly when we send it out. And it's policy that we will try to get them out as soon as possible.
but it is our intent before the canvass, correct?
Well, if you see what's happening here, this is all about the public session canvas. So what could happen is you could have somebody come in and raise a challenge. And up to that point, you guys were prepared to count the ballot. But now you've got this challenge that came out of nowhere, so to speak. And you make a determination that that's going to be rejected based on that challenge. Of course, the voter has no idea, right? So you're going to send them, the clerk's going to send them a notice. That person is then going to receive a letter saying it wasn't counted, but the public session is closed. They have the opportunity to make an election contest if they think there's something wrong with that process. It's in most scenarios, it's not going to happen because even if their vote was counted, it isn't going to change the results of the election. No. It's just the way it, and that's happened in the court cases that I've seen, that occasionally has happened. It's just.
So is this statement about the sending out the notice that has been rejected just strictly from those that are, it seems like since it's under the public session of the canvass, that this is referring to the ballots that are rejected because of the canvass and not, not like what you were talking about, maybe trying to send them out earlier. Am I looking at that correctly, or? Is there another part in here that talks about sending a letter to rejected? Rejection of the ballot envelope? You see what I mean? I'm looking at it strictly under the camp, which is fine, because that's, you know, that, they
I
need
was
to be
looking
notified.
I was looking at it more in general before
Right,
the
yeah.
canvass.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I think
vague,
that's
as we say.
right.
Well, the canvas is so someone can come and say, I don't think that person's in my neighborhood or something like that. Whereas the ones we,
So here's the way I recall this working. The public session of Canvas is not just your meeting at the end.
Okay.
The public session of Canvas carries on over a period of days. When there's, as the ballots come in and there's a review and there's identification of a problem, the clerk's office is trying to get these letters out, right, so that those people could come in time, hopefully, to say, wait, at the actual meeting that you have. And in this, and it doesn't appear to me, based on what I've seen in the past, that this has happened much until recently. So now we're realizing, and that's why last time around, I hit you guys with this laundry list of things you guys had to address, and it was new and weird, but it was because we hadn't really run into this very often, and we realized there were some holes in our process. We needed to get people notification, they needed to come in, and they needed to have a chance to do process rights, to say, hey, wait a minute, there's a problem here, and you guys had to make a decision. So,
But the year before, we had one.
We had one first time in many, many years.
Yeah.
And
I was
think-
thinking it was common.
Oh, no.
And I think at the top of, it's on page 30 of 43, it's paragraph D. It pretty much describes what Dennis is talking about. So we've got a person making a challenge, and the clerk can refuse to accept or count the ballot, part of the ballot, et cetera. The clerk's decision is provisional and subject to review by the election commission. So I think that's what we're talking about. And that's why last year, the deputy clerk was, sending out letters every single day for any of those, what I would argue were provisional decisions that those ballots would not count, subject to your review.
Well, I have one last comment, I promise. On page 42, on line 46, it says refusal to allow employees time off to vote is a violation of what? A code of?
it's a violation of this section.
In this section, which is defining some bad things people do. It's, see, look at 28,230.
So what I have to do is in each of these code sections, I have to describe how severe of a penalty or how severe of a violation this is. So there's Class A misdemeanors, Class B misdemeanors, and then violations.
Okay.
Violations are not criminal, but they're subject to a civil fine, right? So look at line 31.
Right, I see that.
That's a Class B misdemeanor. What does that mean? Well, it means that they're going to possibly be facing a jury trial. They may have a right to a public defender, blah, 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 right? Whereas a violation, a mere violation, it's a fine. They don't get a publicly paid for attorney. I mean, they have a right to challenge it with a appeal process, but it's just not the same.
Well, I understand that, but is it a violation of just the code then? Is that what you're saying, or is it
At
a
C,
violation?
refusal to allow employees time off to vote is a violation under this section.
I see. Okay.
This is all new, this section 13.
Right,
Yes.
right.
Yeah, and I
I
copied
think
it
it's
out
great.
of, I copied it out of the state stuff. The
Right.
state has these provisions.
Okay.
Oh, but,
Are you talking
So
about?
C says that if you violate A or B, it's a violation.
Okay. Is that really apropos though now, that people can absentee vote and they can mail-in vote? Go in,
The state says it is. Now, obviously, we could, here's the thing. The state laws apply to state and municipal elections. So this is already a crime at the muni level for muni elections. I mean, it's a crime in a muni election to do this. All I'm doing is putting this in muni code, which allows us to prosecute these, rather than waiting for the state to decide if it's going to or not use its resources. We can decide to use our own resources to do this if it's a problem. And that has the added benefit of us being able to control local law enforcement policies. Right? And that's why we have a municipal prosecutor. The only reason we have a municipal prosecutor, 15 attorneys that prosecute municipal crimes, is because there was a sense that the state wasn't doing enough to deal with local crime issues. So we said, well, we're going to create our own shop, and we're going to go after these misdemeanor crimes because we don't think the state devotes enough resources to us, and we really want to make this something we do here locally. And this is the same sort of idea. If we have election problems, is the state DA's office going to take this case? I don't know, he's got a couple of felony murders to deal with. He may not want to focus. But we may think it's important, so we can charge it under our code and process it if we want to.
I think it's a good idea because employers, people don't know this. If they ask to go vote, there should be excuse for unemployment.
If there isn't time before or after their work
yeah,
shift.
just this.
some people
If they're
work,
on 12-hour shifts, yes. but-
and some people do, so.
My husband sometimes works a 20-hour day, so, you know, there's, and they do let him off.
Oh, good.
I do have one other comment. I think that the language you put on page 26 on line 21 is really going to be helpful. That was the big discussion item about whether, you know, and we have the word square there, by the way, too, so we need to take that out. But, you know, when the name is printed on the ballot and then written in, you know what I mean, where we had that discussion, so that language is added in there.
Okay, I'm sorry, page 26, lines what?
21, where it starts number 9, which is
Okay.
new.
We're actually deleting, that's a
That's
deletion.
Oh, that's delete, I'm
Yes.
sorry, that's a
Yeah.
delete, I see that, I'm sorry. Did we come to any, is there anything in here, that's in my mind was, is there anything in here that talked about, I was reading that the wrong way, is there anything in here that talks about where we had that discussion whether someone wrote in the name of a candidate but didn't, they weren't in that precinct? You know, they went and voted at the school instead of their own precinct, and they wrote in.
Voting out of district.
Right.
Yeah, we did. That
Is
was.
that with the improper ballot one?
That was the
Yes.
partial, yes.
Okay, all right, okay. I was thinking it was that one, but okay.
You did an incredible job.
Yes, I was going to
Really.
say, wow.
A lot of work.
Yeah, I think we started on this, and did we start in August? Or
May.
May.
We started in May. Yeah.
And
Because you
we-
get interrupted by other things, so
Right.
but it was good. We'd do some writing, we'd get together and talk it through, and we'd do some more writing and come back.
Yeah. Amanda set up weekly meetings, and we just plowed through section by section. And obviously, you can see Dennis did amazing work for us on this.
You did too, because you got the issues that were there.
And thank you for bringing forward the issues that the commission brought forward. I think that we really incorporated some great stuff with that, so.
So let's talk about what happens next. The clerk's office, of course, would like to facilitate your next meeting for you. We need to publicly notice it. So if you would like to set up a time, we could make it, we could make it a longer meeting so you could do some drafting. We want to make sure that even your drafting and your deliberations need to be public. If you're sending emails back and forth, that's okay, but those, you should copy the clerk's office on that so we can keep a record of it. And those drafts would be ultimately public as well. So I just want to make sure that we don't have any Open Meetings Act violations. So is there anything we can do to facilitate your next meeting? And the other thing that I can do is email
Gwen wasn't
you
here, so maybe you want to explain to her what's needed. She missed the
the
beginning.
resolution.
Right, she wasn't here.
I wasn't here the first 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Okay, so Dennis.
Okay,
um,
so what we need is a resolution, a written resolution from this body that puts forth its comments and recommendations. And obviously, you need to do whatever you do in that document by majority vote. I can certainly prepare a document, a new AO, that has all of these technical things we talked about, and I can have that for you relatively quickly, so you have it before your next meeting, however you want this to go. So that you could simply take that, we'll call it an S version, you could attach that document to your resolution that says, in addition to these comments we have here in our resolution, we recommend adoption of the S version, because it's going to have its technical corrections. So in your resolution, you don't have to do all of this work, I'll do that for you. If you have other issues, for example, Gwen, you had some concerns about the allocation of responsibilities. If you guys decide that you want to make comments or recommendations that are of that nature, you can decide as a body if you want to, and that can be in your resolution. But I'll take care of this and have an exhibit for you. That's an S version that'll be attached to your document.
What's the Assembly's agenda? Why are they wanting to do this?
Because they
It's
want it
actually the
done.
clerk's office because we are beginning to prepare for a 2014 election. So
We
we
need
want
75 days.
to be operating under these changes.
And the other thing that the clerk was trying to do was to allow the assembly members to be able to vote on this before they were required to declare that they would be running. So that period begins when?
January 20, that day.
Yeah, so that'd be the 24th. So it's possible that we could extend this until January 14th. We just wanted to make sure that an assembly member didn't declare that they were running for reelection and then be in a position where they had to vote on a change to an election code. I think you can all tell there's nothing in here that's gonna affect them at all. But we just wanted to try to facilitate that for them. So the assembly meeting is on December 17th, and we have, there is, the deadline for the addendum is December 13th. That's Friday, December 13th. So if we could have something, the agenda deadline is tomorrow at noon, and I don't think we're gonna make that. So if you would like to meet sometime before December 13th, and if you could adopt it before then, we could get it on the addendum before this meeting of the 17th.
You won't be here all these weeks. I'm gone for 2 weeks. But I will have access to email. And-
How about
and
phone? Could you
and phone.
participate in a meeting by phone?
Friday the 13th. I'm going to be in Quebec, which is what, 4 hours, 3 hours? I believe that's a 3-hour time change on my phone. I can certainly participate by teleconference.
Okay.
What about Bonnie?
And so Joyce, I'm sorry, I missed, when are you gonna be gone?
I'm gone the next 2 weeks. I'm
And-
leaving on the 7th and won't be back till the 21st.
Okay.
Petey said she'd be back at the 12th.
So we have the Title 28 work session that day.
The 13th.
So you're wanting us to meet before the 13th? is that
I
right?
think ideally, if possible.
And you should probably plan on coming to the work session on the 13th. That's the assembly work session, so time.
We'll provide lunch.
It's up to you.
Oh, that'll bring everybody.
My thing says 1 o'clock.
On the 13th?
Yes, it's from 1 until 3, I believe.
And the work session is just for this? Is that
For the assembly's review
Oh,
of it.
okay.
Yeah,
I meant review of the,
Title 28.
Okay.
Yeah. They have other work sessions earlier in the day.
I move that we meet on Thursday, December 12th at 10.
Would Petey be in by then?
No, but we don't have enough time to wait for her.
I saw that in an email.
I thought you said it was the 12th. that she was
I
back.
did. It seems to me, I read that in an email,
Yeah, I don't have it.
and I don't know the time at all.
And you have to fix the weather.
Yeah, that would be 2 o'clock for me.
And there's another
No,
meeting
yeah.
in the afternoon. Oh, 2 o'clock for you in Quebec.
Yeah.
I
that's
thought you
what
were
I'm
saying
No,
2
no, no,
o'clock
I'm trying to
would be
figure,
better.
I wouldn't want you to have a meeting.
Yeah.
In the middle of the night.
Right, you know, like, but it's a 4-hour time change to just look, so if you had it at 10, it would be 2 for me, that would probably work.
Okay.
And so I'd suggest 10 until noon. Would
Okay.
that be satisfactory? If you finish early, that's fine, but it would give you an opportunity if you would like. So, you know, I can email you a shell of a resolution, so a prior resolution. Amanda and I will get that to you. And then you can, you know, work on that, or you can, then if we need to edit it after your meeting, we can go edit it and bring it back and you can adopt it. So I want to make sure you have enough time to do that. But again, I want to make sure that if you do any emailing back and forth, you do need to make sure that Amanda is copied on those emails so that we can preserve them for the public record.
Do we have to organize ourselves prior to this action?
I'm not sure I understand what you
No,
mean.
not until January.
I know that that's the date that we
Yeah.
would normally organize, so we're running against the last year's organization.
Yeah,
Okay.
Gwen is the chair,
I don't
so.
want anybody to see.
So we have to make sure we have a quorum on that date.
Could someone check with Sue?
Sue Lenore.
Sue, are you still
I'm
there?
here.
Okay.
Hi, the 12th works for me. Was the 2 p.m. time decided on?
Okay, 10 o'clock. 10 o'clock in the morning until noon.
Oh, 10 till noon. Okay, missed that.
Unless you're in
Joyce,
Quebec.
Joyce is coming at 2 o'clock
I'm in
Quebec
Quebec,
time.
it's gonna be 2 o'clock, so.
Oh, okay, got that. Okay. And also, are we attending the assembly work session the next day also?
And I will send out emails about both of these, but the
Okay,
assembly,
great.
we would encourage you to attend.
Yeah, I'm available both days.
Perfect.
What time was the assembly work session on the 13th?
From 1 until 3.
Do we have a new member on the commission? We had someone who was off, or went off. Do they
Yeah.
stay on until someone's appointed, or are they,
No,
when their
they're
term
off.
is done, they're off?
I think there are some technicalities about that, and however, let's see, Alice Handley's term was up,
Right.
and
Peggy
Peggy's
Baumeister's.
term was up.
Right.
And although they could have continued until someone was appointed, they declined, is our understanding. They've declined to continue, so there are vacancies.
And aren't the appointments usually right around now?
In October.
Oh, yeah,
Their terms were up in October.
okay.
Are there new
Yeah.
applications in?
We have not heard of any, but I can follow up with the mayor's office about that.
How would a person apply?
Well, how about if I have Amanda send you the information?
Awesome. I'll send it to all the commissioners.
I can't remember what's online, but
It's online.
the shortcut is also called a woman named Karen Bretz.
Okay.
She's the mayor's office liaison for boards and commissions.
You've all met Karen. She came to your first meeting last year.
And we're looking for somebody for the animal control board too, so if anybody wants to do that.
I think it would be nice if you could let us know if there is any, if there are any, otherwise, people who have.
I could certainly ask
If
Karen.
that's public, I don't know.
Yes, she will let us know if she's looking for someone or if she's booked. Remember, the requirements are, obviously you have to be a registered voter in Anchorage. And you also, it says that you have to have worked at a precinct.
I think we have on our agenda member comments, if there's any comments. And then audience participation.
May I ask Mr. Trady something? Silly. No.
I'm not sure I'll answer, but go
Okay,
ahead.
do you think the assembly have they had time to even read some of this stuff?
They haven't had time to read it, but I think most will accept it because we need to make these changes. We saw what happened a couple of years ago. I've been here and watched people interfering with you guys as you're doing your work. So we'll do whatever it takes to make sure the election runs as smoothly as it can. Because we can't get involved in this once the election season starts off. In fact, for those of us running for a re-election, we stay out of the clerk's office because they run the elections. We want as much distance as we can from this. So let us deal with this, get it to us, we'll pass it, and we're not going to mess with it.
So it might be kind of a rubber,
Rubber stamp, that's a terrible word.
I'm sorry.
We'll give it due diligence quickly.
And for the record, Adam Trombley, the chair of the Ethics and Elections Committee, has been very involved in this too. So there is assembly involvement.
Are we on the hook if we do something wrong?
No, we are. We're on the hook. Ultimately, you send it to us, we hold a public hearing on it, we're the ones that approve it. So we move on. We appreciate all you do in doing this.
I did have a question. You looked at the Washington thing, and you said they had that classroom, which was very intriguing. Were they able to view the identifiers?
They have video cameras throughout that are directly, so if you think that it's uncomfortable to have someone hovering over you, you could potentially have a video camera and you don't know if someone's watching or not, that is just right behind you.
It's high definition TV. Believe me, if you have a pimple, it will be on.
And there's signs all over. Everywhere you look, there's a sign that says, remember, you're on camera. And I just think like, there's all the times you just sit at your desk and.
They're webcams too, so all of the cameras go to a website so that the public can watch from the website everything that you're doing. It was absolutely amazing.
Was this a state or municipal election?
Or not amazing,
The
depends on your
state
point of
runs
view,
the-
what side of the camera you're on.
My husband had an idea that we could put everything onto the computer so that people could read it except the social security number. And I thought, my God, by the time you got all that, the cost would be incredible.
So I have a question about quorum. Is the quorum of the number of sitting members, or is it the number of members that should be on the commission?
The
Is that-
latter, the number of seats. So if
Okay.
you're a 6-seat commission, your quorum is 4, and you have to have a majority vote, so the majority vote is 4.
Okay, so since we're missing 2 members, they still comprise part of
You
that?
still need 4 to take action.
Okay, all right. Sometimes they
one
work
of-
differently. I
one
didn't
of-
know how this works, so it's.
One of them is an alternate, so but it doesn't make any difference, it's still 4.
And I'm the alternate.
Okay.
I'm listed as the alternate.
I understood one too.
Does she count today then?
My what?
Does the alternate count as the quorum for today?
We had
Yeah, but you had
5.
somebody on the phone, so you're
Yes.
okay anyway.
All right, thank you so much. Can I get a motion to adjourn from one of the?
Second it.
Oh, good.
Thanks, Sue.
That's good.
Thank you.
Hearing no objection, you are adjourned. Thank you very much, ladies.